All right. So, welcome to the Passion in Motion podcast. I am your host, Mutsa, and today I am joined by a very, very special guest, Dr. Jennifer Kai Lynn. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Doctor Jennifer.
Hey, Melissa.
Good
It's
morning on your end.
good morning. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. I am currently located in Indonesia, and we are just at 8 o'clock, and so I think we're like 12 hours apart right now,
We
which
are.
is
We are.
amazing
So,
that we can match our energy levels.
exactly. I love it. I love it. Well, for listeners today, today's episode is going to be centered around the conversation of human connection and also really diving deeper into Jennifer's creation called the U Lab, and she's going to talk more about that. But that's kind of the objective of the episode. But so just kind of getting started on that, I wanted to give you the opportunity to say hi to the people out there and kind of give a brief introduction about who you are, and then we can kind of get started into the nitty gritties of the conversation. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks. A little bit of background. I mean, those of you, in the world we live in now, you can do a quick Google search and find out the more boring sort of part of the written story. But over the last like 35 years, my focus has really been on helping kind of develop human capacity and thinking about how we as people really need to develop awareness and be adaptable. Kind of forgetting sometimes that we're an animal and a part of a species, and that sometimes what we need to be able to do, right, is be able to be. Some people would call that being fully present.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it's the sense of like adaptability and awareness, and really thinking about that in terms of instead of necessarily trying to problem solve every problem that's coming up, really getting into developing the capacities to have a sense of more like equanimity and ease. So, full range of human experience, full range of human emotions, but not getting stuck in any one area. And so that started for me with 10 years of doing massage therapy, where through the work of like Peter Levine and looking at how trauma is stored in the body and looking at
Mm.
trauma sensitivity and trauma awareness from a very somatic sort of lens, realizing that I was extending over and above what my protocol and capacity was. So I went back to school and studied Buddhist psychology and peace studies to help understand that of what I was seeing happen with clients. And then that moved into developing an approach in my master's program where I studied organizational leadership, but with strong emphasis on the roles of identity and trauma.
Mm.
So this approach, the engaged identity approach, was taking form. And I did a brief stint with the Mind and Life Institute as a visiting scholar, where I was working with some incredible neuroscientists, philosophers, and long-term contemplative practitioners, looking at what that real world data-driven, science-backed, what is the efficacy of this and what does that mean? And
Mm.
kind of help feed the approach with some of that data and knowledge, right? And so that took me into a PhD program because we were already doing this work. So we were working with
Yeah.
like, local leaders, government leaders, security leaders, tribal chiefs in Nigeria. And back in like 2014, 2013, 14, as Boko Haram was ramping up there.
Mm.
And really trying to help not only address those situations and ex-combatants, being reintegrated and things, but also just, there's so many different types of conflicts that are going on. And so we
Yeah.
were running programs there. We were working with grade school teachers in Costa Rica who were working with kids who, were having a really difficult home situation And so really
Mhm.
looking at the efficacy of like what can we do to develop our skills as human beings, right? To
Yeah.
not only just support one another, but to more effectively, my goal really, this is not the elevator pitch one would hope for, but the my goal at the end of my life is to feel like I would look back and say, my gosh, I had a really rich, full human experience.
Mm.
I'm not saying it was all good. I'm not saying it was all easy. I'm not saying I wasn't traumatized multiple times. I'm not saying I accomplished so many figures in the bank. It's simply to have a sense of ease, knowing that I used and experienced life to the fullest of my ability. So that's kind of what we do at the U Lab is to help people develop those capacities to have that sort of expansion, and then
Mm.
the capacities to be able to really resonate and feel that. Doesn't mean we're not rolling out of bed stressed out about the market drop or the state of, international affairs. But for
Yeah.
those people who do a lot of work um, in the in the mental or psychophysiological kind of healing fields,
Hmm.
team leaders, this is about really setting a table and an example as a human being also for other people. You
I
know,
love that.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense. Yeah. And again, I think that is a wonderful vision to have to say, you know what, at the end of my life, I want to make sure that I experienced everything I could fully experience,
Yeah.
right? Because like people say this all the time, life is too short. So why spend it not taking opportunities that can make you feel things that, enrich your life.
Yeah.
So one interesting thing that I picked up in what you're talking about is how massage therapy changed into this whole, like how that you said moved you into this path of what you did and like all the school you went to. So in my head I was just thinking, what made you get into massage therapy? Like how did you get introduced into that?
Yeah. So that was my mom. So now everybody pull out your pens and papers and get ready to do the math. When I was a kid in the United States, back in the 70s, it was a time when this idea of integrative medicine and functional medicine and Eastern spirituality, if we want to call it that, was sort of already
Hmm.
being planted from the movement that was happening in the 60s. And with that, a lot of interest in alternative medicines and alternative lifestyles and philosophy, right?
Yeah.
And so in the 70s, my mom became a massage therapist, which back then, if you went to your kindergarten's, show and tell and brought your mom and said, this is what my mommy does, we had parents who are like, your mother is a prostitute,
Huh.
because there was such an unusual, we hadn't made that leap yet in the United States, right?
Hmm.
Around a lot of mind body connection. It was very much more of that Western centric, um, uh, sort of medicinal viewpoint, right? In terms of thinking around that. So it was really through her. So my youth was spent, doing a lot of meditation and having a lot of body work and communing with nature and doing a lot of things that we hear about now. So that started
So
pretty young for me. Yeah.
oh, I'm just curious if at that time massage therapy was not popular, how did your mom discover, like, become that? Like, I guess I don't know. I'm just going back. I'm just curious, like, where was inspiration for her to then get started in that
Yeah,
if it wasn't
that's a
like,
really good question. And she and I were like best friends. And, I would love to tell you a story about why that she was drawn to that. And the reality is, I don't know that I could speak on that for her. I know that what I do know is that she was at a point in her life that
Mm,
she had just come out of a very challenging divorce. Again, this was the late 70s. So she
yeah.
was a part of for those women who are very interested in equal rights and human rights,
Hmm.
she was the generation in the US where women started very slowly speaking very clearly around their choice to have children or to step outside of a marriage or be in the workforce, or be, an independent voice first before a partnered voice, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can remember being 6 years old, sitting in the car of our Chevy Impala. I love that car, uh, waiting, sitting in the car, and she was in the bank trying to get a credit card, and she came out to the car crying because she couldn't get a credit card without a male co-signature at that time, and that would have been 76, 77.
Wow.
So, these are the stories that I think a lot of young women are like, oh, how did these women put up with it? And and I applaud, of course, all the movement that we have in those spaces. But like anything, I think it's so important to really understand the history so that we can value the contributions along the way. So
Yeah.
I think for her, what was happening in her life was not giving her a sense of, what we would say sort of in the international development world, agency might be the word that we
Mm,
would use. If we were
yeah.
talking about in other sectors, we might say autonomy,
Hmm.
right? If we were talking from a spiritual or a religious sort of lens, we might say sense of purpose, right?
Yeah.
Servant leadership. What's my contribution here when I'm feeling and I am so limited by context? And I think that that's what propelled her to search outside of the more traditional offerings, just sort of across the board at that time, the
Mm,
more normalized, if you would, context. And so that drew her to Buddhist studies and then to kind of that exploration for herself around the mind, if we would, the mind body connection. Yeah.
wow. That's a lovely backstory. That's just context wise. No, I mean, that's a no, that was really fascinating, and I know that's a lot to. Yeah, I'm so happy I asked because then it also adds more context to how you feel. It just feels like it was building on each other from a very young age for you.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, when I'm facilitating or working with people, I'm really, there's no, and I appreciate you doing doctor, and I throw the doctor out there sometimes. My PhD is in peace and conflict, and I have a specialization then, of course, like in human adaptive capacity. That's where my research went, right? Of really
mhm,
looking at the neurophysiological effects, kind of a cell to system, right? Not that systems
yeah,
aren't cells, but that full migration of like the biological influences of nature of the physical body into the way that we're making meaning. So things like inactive consciousness, as well as embodied consciousness, two different things. A lot of times people kind of confuse some of that. um,
hmm,
and so yeah, I think for me it was absolutely, I was really really lucky to have two very, very different parents. So I had my dad, very capitalistic, very money driven, very, wanting to get his recognition through power and acquisition,
yeah,
right? Be it things, houses, cars, or money, right? So it would,
hmm,
for him, his validation was through this acquisition and power piece.
yeah,
And for mom, her direction was much more of this, if we would say metaphysical understanding of what am I doing here? What's my sense of purpose? What is all this? So one very capitalist, one very spiritualist. And so for, I'd say probably up until my late 30s, mid 30s, you would watch, I can look back and watch myself kind of ping between the
Between two.
two influential ideologies, right?
Mm. Okay.
So there'd be times when my behaviors and my lifestyle choices would be like, I need to get that 6 burner stainless steel stove for the house. And that's very important to me, and
Mm-hmm.
a year later, I would be sitting, 3 weeks of meditation and silence, because I'd be like, where have I gone? What,
Yeah.
that's not me. And so the story sounds interesting and intriguing, but there's a lot of pain and confusion in through that, right? Of really
Yeah.
finding
100%.
my way based on the world that I was living in and the influences that I had. Um,
Mm. So where are you now
yeah,
on
good
that
question.
pendulum?
Yeah, so I guess one way I could say it real fast is for those people who know me, um, think I should set up a side hustle on teaching people how to downsize, a little Maria Kondo. Everything I own still fits into 2 rolling duffel bags at this point. So I live a very nomadic life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been in large part by choice. There will be times where I'll sit down for, a few years and have like a home base,
Yeah.
but still traveling and moving around the world quite a bit. Um, yeah, it's funny to watch because at this stage, to answer your question, I'm in my middle.
Mm.
Which is what I mean by that is I'm not saying it's 50% this and 50% that, but my middle has come to be like there are times when I drink coffee in the morning, 1 to 2 cups. It's a little religious thing. Let's not talk about if coffee's good or bad, but this is what I do. And in
Yeah.
that, I use a French press. And so I have a little travel French press that goes with me everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
This is a ridiculous when everything you own fits in 2 duffel bags, that is taking up some space. And it
Yeah.
does not escape me that it means that much to me. It's not just the coffee. It's not the addiction to the caffeine. It's the ritual of having me own something that is familiar no matter where I go.
Yeah.
And so I watch my relationship with these material things in that way, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why this?
Mm.
I'm not saying I don't
Yeah.
have some things or that I don't shop, but why? And so I'm always, that's, in the back of my head someplace or at some point along the ownership, pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the middle, and like I said, my middle, and so yeah, and so there's a lot that feels really comfortable. There's a lot of ease in that.
Mm. No, that's good. Yeah. You know what? I would like to think of myself as a material person too. Like I hold on to things. I think I'm on that spec where I want to acquire things
Yeah,
but just being in the life of an immigrant is unfortunately it forces you to not attach yourself to things as much. So I could also pack my life up in 2 bags,
yeah,
and because I've had to do it multiple times, right? Like so, my need to feel like okay, I have a base that if I acquire things, I know I'm here for the long haul because I've not been in that state of mind, for the last 10 to 15 years or whatever the case may be.
right,
So I can just I don't have so I feel like it's good to an extent. So because I can literally just okay if I'm leaving I just know that I just need my basic clothes and I
right,
can go wherever I go.
yeah.
Because I love podcasting so much, I'll have my microphone with me for sure. So,
That's your
so
French press.
that's my French press. Exactly. That's this microphone is my French press. I take it with me wherever I go.
I love it.
And so, but like, yeah, I can really pack my life in 2 suitcases. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating. It's the parallels of what you're talking about versus like
Listen,
for me.
I'm in the process right now of actually getting a home base where I'm actually now saying I'm going to commit to signing a lease and calling, and I will return here as I'm venturing
Hmm.
around. I will keep returning to here for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah.
My point is this is not a everybody should own less diatribe. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like you're
Yeah.
talking about, it's that ability, it's that adaptability piece. If you need to have it, it's developing the capacity to be aware of what's driving that need
Yeah.
without any judgment, but just with the awareness.
Hmm.
You want to feel like you're, not just alive, but that you're really truly engaging with the choices and with, that you're making. And sometimes for all kinds of reasons, we're not able to make what we feel to be fully conscious choices, right? We
Yeah.
could be driving somebody else's context through our cortex that's making us value other things at different times. It could be safety and security issues that are migrating our behavior and thought patterns, right? There's
Hmm.
all sorts of ways that can sort of be present. But it's the ability, like you're saying, like I know what that's like,
Yeah.
it's it's that ability to have the dance, right? And the fluidity to move through.
Yeah.
And, no doubt, that does not always mean that the reasons for developing that capacity have been, sometimes they're highly traumatizing and, we could say unfair and, all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Not to negate what has driven or to pretend that, oh, look, now I have all this ability. So that was really a good thing.
Yeah.
That's not at all, sort of where I'm sitting with it. But it's to acknowledge that where is the value in the human experience? And
Yeah.
the value oftentimes is as much in and anyone who's, we talk about this when we think about resilience a lot, right? And that
Hmm.
mystical term resilience. What
Yeah.
does that mean? Does that mean overcoming the past? Right? Because
Hmm.
a lot of people would argue, no, you're not going to overcome the past because that imprint has already physically, psychologically, spiritually, belief system, mindset, worldview, all already going to be with you.
Doesn't
And
leave you. Yeah.
yeah, and that's good, right? I mean, I don't want to overcome the bad things. I would rather integrate the learning of that experience and occasionally give a pat on the back to everybody after, when you sort of feel like you're on the other side or having a
Yeah.
sense of safety. And that's kind of, that touches back into a little bit about what we're looking at the U Lab, right? The idea here is like your life is your laboratory,
Mm.
right? So this is your life. This is your chance to figure out what this human experience is.
An experiment.
It's an experiment.
Yeah.
And
Experiment and
so sometimes
experience.
sometimes we're in such crisis. It's almost impossible to rewire at the time. And we talk about that. Anyone who's studied like conflict analysis, there's a time when you can do like peace building work, and then you do, sort of reconstruction and post conflict, intervention. And there's certain things you don't do sort of at that peak of a conflict, right?
Yeah.
No different for any of us when we're looking at diversity or difference or change in our lives. There are times when I'm still an 8-year-old child and someone's saying, look both ways across the street, but I see the kitty. And if I don't get there immediately, I'm not going to be able to pet the little kitty. And so I'm not pet, I hear you.
Yeah.
But I'm saying there is something else going on that's driving this, or there's a
Yeah.
fire and I've got to flee. So I might
Hmm.
not look both ways across the street. And so it's all of this, right, serves us in different ways at different times. And it's really saying, what can we do? Very
Mm.
much of what you would hear about, like in Buddhist psychology, around that observer's mind, right? Being able to engage in life while also observing. It's the
Mm.
idea for me, a lot of times it feels like the sweet bitterness. How
Yeah.
something can be like, oh, that's so great. And oh, I'm sad. Like when you part ways with a good friend that you won't see for a while,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That. Yeah. It is always one of those moments. It's like, man, I think there's a quote out there that says, "How lucky am I that I get to feel the pain of not getting to see you anymore."
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And there's,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that you've just summed it up perfectly. There's some fantastic research around, and I'm pro happiness, by the way, you know, um,
Yeah.
but there's some a really amazing research um, around, is it a happy life or an interesting life?
Hmm.
What is the difference in that value? And so as we look at different ways and different people, at least my experience so far is I have definitely had different ideologies driving my belief, although I would
Yeah.
say fairly consistency, a foundational belief system that's kind of been, tested and expanded, has kind of been the way would think about it. But for me at least, there's a lot of symbiosis between this idea of an interesting life and what I'm talking about in terms of the capacity development that we're working with at the U Lab, which is, being able to have this full range of emotion and this full engagement with the present moment. And so, through that is, we're contemplative practices, breathing, yoga, meditation. There's all of those types of things, and cognitive based therapy and coaching and, solution driven things. But I'm
Hmm.
I'm not really interested in solving one problem as much as, kind of what you're saying, developing that awareness of saying, was I here for this ride? No matter what you believe,
Yeah.
afterlife, heaven, whatever your belief system may be, it's taking, I believe that no matter what that looks like, the similarity, in all of those wisdom and spiritual traditions is to say, be human
Hmm.
and gather that information. In Buddhism, it's called the precious human birth, right?
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
the idea is this is a gift to be here, because with this comes certain, dare we say, I'll say mental, capacities, biological
Mhm.
capacities. I think as we delve in more and more to consciousness and the ideas of that becomes a little bit more in depth, not for our time today.
Yeah.
But thinking about, what is this and how are we functioning here, and being able to take the most of that is exactly, you know, what takes us into the next, whatever is our next. Yeah.
No, that's so true. Wow. Yeah. There's a lot to dive into in these sorts of things, but talking more. So before we do a much deeper dive into the U Lab, because I want to get to a point where we can, where if someone is hearing more about this, they're like, I really want to get involved, like, and participate in
Yeah.
what the U Lab is about. I want to understand first for you, what does human connection mean to you? Like, person, like, why are you drawn to it? Or like, what, yeah, just maybe, yeah, let's start there. Like, what does human connection mean to you? Why is it so important?
I'm going to flip this question, not to deflect, but if you don't mind, and then
Yeah, go ahead.
hold my feet to the fire to make sure that I answer, please. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But somebody a couple years ago who knows me, who knows the spaces and sectors I've been working in a lot over the last, particularly 4 or 5 years, was like, "Oh, Jen, it's so great. Your life's purpose is to help other people."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and this is a really good friend of mine, somebody that was supposedly, I would say, knew me. And I was like, actually, that's not right.
Mm.
That's not my life's purpose. The reality, it may look like that, and I could tell you that, and people would believe that, right? But that's kind of
Yeah.
one of those masks that we would wear, where is it true? Yes. But is it the truth? You know, it may
Mm.
be true with a tiny t, and then the real capital T truth. is I'm interested in this. I'm doing this to, the only thing that I have agency and capacity over, first and foremost, is my actions, my belief system, the way I treat people, right?
Mm.
My walk in the world, if you will. And so when I think about human connection, so I'm from the what we would call what's inactive consciousness camp when you think about theory of mind and things like that, which means that consciousness is by nature inherent in relationship. It is inactive. Consciousness is inactive, which means it's not my consciousness, or I'm not a little piece of a bigger consciousness. It is all connected. So the
Mm.
idea of, like, let's say awareness, or, would be that I am kind of like we've talked about before, when you meet somebody, random stranger in an airport, and you have a fantastic conversation with them that you may never see
Yeah.
again. It's a moment where there's a resonance between the consciousness that's stretched in these two human beings that's coming together, and that's where that loop of connection is coming from,
Mm.
because it's really not two separate things that are making a connection. It's more of a becoming aware of the connection that's already present.
Huh. So for you, would you say then that all humans are connected in some way, and then that's is that what that means
Well, I
for you?
jumped
Like,
right into that, didn't I? Sorry, I didn't even
yeah.
let you finish. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? We're sharing this very real time experiment, right? No matter,
Yeah.
if you're in the people who think this is a hologram that's being, no matter where you're coming from, or, if Earth is the exalted existence and there's no one else, no matter how we want to break it down, all, not just us, but,
Mm.
like, I think about it when I'm sitting right now at a desk that's wooden. There's a connection and an awareness that there was a tree, a living tree, that was cut down to make this desk, for me to be able to sit here and put my things on it and utilize it. Do you know?
Yeah.
There's a connection there. And so that's part of the awareness development, is, it's the essence of of respect.
Hmm.
It's the essence of acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
All of this, every little thing that I'm coming across, that any of us in my belief system, right? And it's
Hmm.
not from an arrogant place or a narcissistic place, like everything's here for me. On the
Yeah.
contrary, it's I am a small part of the everything,
Hmm.
or a part,
Yeah.
and to be grateful, like we would be to our parents and our grandparents and our good teachers along our lives, to be grateful for, for everything else, right? For nature's resources, for the
Yeah.
clean water. So yeah, the sense of interconnectivity, I think, would be hard to escape, particularly if you were going to look at it from a scientific standpoint. We don't have to get into
Yeah.
quantum physics, but just a basic, homeostasis of the biological planet Earth. You know,
Yeah.
we cannot
100%.
escape the fact that we are a species, and I think that there's a lot of disconnect a lot of times with that. You know,
Mm.
sort
So
of
yeah, you know what?
we're smart, we have this brain functioning, and so therefore we're sort of at the top of the heap making all the decisions. You know,
Exactly. And there are people, because I mean, as we're talking, I just think about people out there who feel like, because there's a statement that people always say that there's more that binds us than separates us, right?
yeah,
And this connection between people is shared across different countries, races, whatever the case. We're all people, we're all living the same life. Not like, we're all
yeah,
experiencing life,
right,
right? At the same,
right.
we're all alive essentially. Um, so when there's some people who say, I could never relate to that kind of
Mhm.
person, but that's really not true, because you can, and you would, if you actually like, you can always connect with something with somebody. That's my philosophy in life, that I know that I can connect with you on something 100%. There's nothing that I cannot connect with you on, because my human experience and your human experience, they're gonna be intersections. So there's gonna be something that we can find commonality in. It's just about our willingness to find that connection and see each other as individuals. Because once we feel like I can't have a connection with you, that's when the thought process of, oh, this person is lesser than, oh, this person is
Mm-hmm.
bad, this person is this person is that. And because you're not taking that time. So
No.
in your experience, or like in just what you've gone through, how do you facilitate individuals, or like how do you help people connect with one another, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, you've brought up some really good points, and I think one of the things that comes to my mind first and foremost is that the sense of aversion,
Mm-hmm.
right? The othering, right? If we
Yeah.
talk about from a psychological standpoint, the us and them, in group, out group
Mm-hmm.
kind of, social theories, is really, again, yes, that is happening. But why is that happening?
Yeah.
Right? We are gonna spend a lot of resources and a lot of time answering or treating with band-aids the symptoms and not the disease.
Yeah.
And so if we're always, and again, this is, as I say to people will be familiar with this phrase from me, is the world according to Jen. These are my opinions. I don't give advice. And I take full ownership. Even if I'm going to misspeak and go, oh no, don't put that on live. I'll
Yeah.
take full ownership of to the best of my ability to communicate my beliefs. But I think what happens so much in so much of this work is we are acting as if everything is happening in the same time frame.
Mm-hmm.
There's the mystery of how we relate to time, right? And our minds
Mm-hmm.
are watching this clock go around and days go by, and even feeling the difference of the seasons as they pass in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
And relationally, not everything is sharing that same time frame. What I
Hmm.
mean by that is, and I'll use the internet as an example. You now can see what people are doing and how they're living their lives in real time all over the world. And that ability is something that has just been available to us, to your, kind of, let's say, average person. You can
Mm-hmm.
stream some clips from here and see who's TikToking over there and get your latest, news over here. And you are on a 24/7 viewing, option of what other human beings are doing everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Now, if we look back at kind of the way humans used to develop, right, we're very tribal. We want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we can meet Maslow's needs, right? We need water, we need shelter, we need food, and we need some, acknowledgement, right?
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
And when you start messing with my ability or my perceived ability to get that stuff, it
Hmm.
starts igniting an enormous amount of fear. So, in some ways, and I'll posit this, is that in some ways, the internet, for all the good that can be gleaned from it, right, from this access that we have to one another, that can create fantastic tools for connection and learning and education and expanding worldviews and all this amazing things, there is in there also the this is kind of where the FOMO part is, right? It lies in that
Yeah.
of like, I see you, you're not even in my city, but I see you over there doing something that I don't agree with or I don't like. And now I'm worried you're going to come closer to me. And it feels like you're closer to me because I see you. I used to not
Hmm.
be able to, I might hear through, some storytelling through the ancestors or someone riding on a horse delivering a message from the neighboring village. The information was coming at a different time. And having that information would give me time to think, prepare, educate, understand more. And instead, everything is coming at me all the time. So I
Hmm.
would posit that there is an undercurrent that stays alive around, are you coming in to, whether this is conscious or not, are you coming in to take my resources? Are you coming in to harm my belief system? Are you coming in to hurt me or my family or my loved ones? And it's not, and I'm not saying that there's not hatred in the world at all. I'm not saying that there's not bias in the world. That's not what I'm saying is that there's an underlying literal, physiological fight, flight, freeze of what's happening to
Hmm.
the sympathetic nervous system when we believe we're under threat. And so
Hmm.
as all of this is happening, as great as it is, the yin yang, the flip side of the coin is at the same time that there's fantasticness and amazing ability there is a question mark of like, is that coming to me? Am I ready for that? What is that? Or I don't have that, or I need that. And so there's that constant heightened state of awareness. Um, yeah. So and so with that, I think that the idea of human connection, these can be really complicated, and we're dealing with so many factors. And it just seems like sometimes we want to oversimplify, which is such a disservice. We have so
Yeah.
much that we have in terms of our capacity, but we
Yeah.
have to really kind of dig in and have some of these multiple conversations, right? It's like the veils that we show up with in our relationships. I've been talking with
Hmm.
clients a lot about this lately. What you show your closest friend group, what you show your work friends, what you show your children. And at the end of the day, so much of it is so disconnected and disingenuous, so that the identity and the sense of purpose and the sense of meaning making stays intact. It's a
Hmm.
survival mechanism. In other
Yeah.
words, I need you to like me if we're sharing resources. I need you to like me, if we're going to collaborate. I need you to like me if you're not going to steal my crops. There's got to be some human connection there. And so we're all kind of in that, a lot of dance around who we show up as in the world, which is why so many people are going to bed at night, with a lot of credit card debt from over shopping or a lot of guilt from different addictions or, just in a lot of pain because
Yeah.
it's scary.
Yeah.
There's, I think we have to really acknowledge that and honor that.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, you're right in terms of how fear drives a lot of disconnect, essentially, because my fear, and most of the time, that fear is not even, not to say that it's not real, but it's not, it shouldn't be enough to say, to say that you can't trust or you can't form a connection with these people, right? And it's
Yeah.
interesting, again, the point you're bringing up about social media and some, in terms of that, we are so there's what you just said earlier about how like I can see what a person in Egypt, their day to day is all the way from Canada, right? I'm just thinking if that, if I went back in time 50 years, like 50 years ago, and I told somebody that, hey, I can actually, in the comfort of my own home, I can literally view the life of a person 50,000 kilometers away from me, and I know their whole family, I know their whole name, and I've never met them, and I don't know nothing about them, but I know their day to day, and I can see it. If you that person will be like, you're a sorcerer, you are
Yeah.
you are evil,
Yeah. Yeah.
you are,
Right. Right.
it wouldn't. But the other side of that, because I think that is a powerful. thing of social media that it has enabled us to be able to be connected to so many people that otherwise will not be connected with. But I was thinking just about, like, for example, in my head as you're talking, I was just thinking about an example of like social media and cell phones, smartphones have also limited human connection because I imagine that, let's talk about GPS, right? If I was to go to New York today,
Mhm.
as an example, and I needed directions somewhere, because I have the internet and my phone, I'm just going to Google it and I can just go about my day and I get there. But before that was available, you had to ask somebody, hey, do
Mhm.
you know what the museum is?
Mhm.
And because you made that contact with that person, and for them, they also don't have a phone, so they expect that, oh, if this person doesn't know, they're asking me in goodwill because they really don't know where they're going.
Mhm.
And a connection could come out of that. That could be your next best friend, and you'll be like, hey, I'm actually heading over to the museum too, or you know what, I'll come with you. And that creates a whole new connection, and I feel like we've kind of lost that in
Yeah.
this day and age, just the
Yeah.
need to,
Yeah.
because we're so attached to, or because we're so blessed, let's say, with the internet and smartphones, that
Right.
there's no longer the need to feel like I need to connect with someone, because we
Yeah.
can all be on the train looking at our phones for an hour long ride
Right.
and have no reason to say hi to the person sitting right next to me,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
There's no need for me to do that.
it's as we talk, and I think if there's one thing that I would want to get across, I try to live in and again, I'm not pretending that I don't have judgments, but I am working
Yeah.
towards living in a real, where, like, for me, I'm pro fear.
Hmm.
Fear has a really important part of a component of being able to sustain human life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we
For
need
sure.
we need fear. I don't want to
Keeps you
demonize.
safe.
I don't want to demonize fear any more than I want to demonize friendship. Or
100%. Yeah.
because we all of these are serving a purpose at times. And I love your
Hmm.
example around the using the GPS to get to or being on the train, where we can just hide behind and just or distract with the phones, or I don't even want to say distract, but also just engage with the phone, right? And maybe we're
Yeah.
learning something amazing. But part of what happens is we're not just visual cortex people. We're not just auditory people. We have a
Hmm.
full range of senses as a human species, right? And
Yeah.
so we are now being developed again, where we're strongly reinforcing certain sensory capacity and ability and diminishing others, like tactile,
Hmm.
right? We're not doing as
Yeah.
much. We're not, like you said, I'm on my phone getting the GPS. I don't even have to shake the hand of somebody as I'm asking their kindness to give me directions on how to get to New York. I
Yeah.
don't have to use my olfactory system to know what it is to be, in the desert after the rain and what that smell is, because I'm just seeing the effect of the rain and then the post-rain growth in the desert on the video screen. And so from a development standpoint, certain things are being heightened and certain things are lessening. And there's a question to be asked around what is that doing to our overall long-term capacity to maintain healthy homeostasis. So, we have the Japanese, we're hearing so much now about forest bathing in the West, and nature
Hmm.
exposure therapies. And so this is stuff that has not just been invented, right? This is for millennia upon millennia, humans have known that this kind of these multisensory adaptations are what part of our biological human is. And so I think when we think about connection, we have a tendency to be really focused on the ways that we have strengthened in our minds. What have we've strengthened? Like, oh, I can get on the phone with them. Well,
Yeah.
right, and we're now getting the research and the data that's saying, People are feeling more lonely. They're feeling more isolated, So what's
Exactly.
missing?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we look at it from what I would argue from the biological, sort of standpoint of being a human, what are we missing? The reason we have multiple senses, including what people would say intuition or sixth sense, right? And other wisdom traditions would see that, differently as an inherent part, not sort of this kind of outside thing, right?
Hmm.
But it is that, if we really think about homeostasis in the human body, and in other words, the sense of connection, what is required, right?
Yeah.
Those senses are there for a reason. And we are
Yeah.
so focused on now navigating our human experience through more visual cortex and auditory senses of connection.
Hmm.
That's where a lot of people would talk about, sort of being not embodied, right? That's why you have so many somatic therapies right now that are taking, so much interest around the way that the body is a part of our conscious meaning making. If the body's not moving, if the body's not changing temperature, if the body isn't taking in the olfactory to be able to make those um, uh, uh, hormonal and neurophysiological connections, we have that thing for a reason.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about human connection, I think it's so easy to talk about kind of, some of this other stuff, but I want to bring all this into that conversation, because I think this is where, dare I say, I could, there's some deficit there. So
Hmm.
homeostasis requires, an immensely complicated balance in dance, right? And
Yeah.
the world that we're living in is for quite a few people skewing that. Um, and I think that we have a tendency to try to solve our problems intellectually.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
it makes,
to the point you were making, it is fascinating that in the age where we're so connected to everybody, like I can get on Twitter right now and just talk to a random person. In an age where we're so connected to a lot more people, at the same time, we're experiencing the most loneliness in the world.
well, and I think
So
again, I'm going to keep pushing back on this stuff, not to you,
yeah,
but and I do this with myself all the time. So I'm probably having this
yeah,
conversation with me, as I'm like, now wait a minute, what is that again?
yeah,
Idea that because I can pick up a phone and have a chat with somebody, which I'm doing all the
yeah.
time, that I got up late this morning because I had a late meetings last night in 3 different time zones. Well, what I'm connecting with is a part of a person at the very best. I'm not connecting with their body. I'm not connecting with, I am what I'm connecting with is a very limited part of them, in terms of,
Hmm.
we look at that in terms of how animals connect, right?
Hmm.
It's a very
Yeah,
limited connection that we're having already, just by sheer volume of the methodology of what we're calling the let's say the vehicle for the connection, right? The phone.
yeah, yeah,
Limited. On top of that, then each of us is running our own imprint patterning, fight, flight, freeze, want to be acknowledged, also want autonomy. And that dance where we're like me, but don't abuse me, but I want to get ahead, but I don't want to ask too much, but am I worthy? And all of the layers of identity are also falling into those little written words that we're typing out with our thumbs or our little voice note. So the idea that
yeah.
we're making a connection, I would argue we are not really unpacking connection. We know that it's lacking, right? Like you're saying, we know that
Hmm.
there's more unhappy people, but okay, so why?
Mm.
Why? And I don't mean little easy answer why. I mean big, what the hell is going on here? Why?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because again, it's not difficult for us to say, well, yeah, that's because XYZ, we're we're more lonely, everything's easier, we don't have to interconnect, we don't have to, we can get everything here, so we limit the, interaction.
Hmm.
But I think there's a lot of depth in this in terms of what it is, and this goes back to this kind of idea of embodied consciousness, right? Embodied consciousness is is really saying consciousness is really asking what is the role of the body in consciousness, right?
Mm.
So the body
Yeah.
is helping us as a tool for experiencing consciousness, and what is its influence on consciousness. Now if we think about it in that terms, we can start understanding a lot about why these multisensory things are very important.
Hmm.
Contact, it does not, sometimes you can just sit in a room and see somebody and you do the, and they go, and you both are like, you didn't, no words, nothing happened there. Okay.
Yeah.
There was some physical movement that the auditory system, but other things are happening that you're sensing that are then allowing you to use that physical motion to to express all of those other senses of what it is that you all have apparently agreed to.
Hmm.
How did you
Yeah.
come to an agreement? Do you know what I mean? And that agreement is happening because you all are sensing these different things in these different ways, and somehow going, I'm sensing what you're sensing.
Yeah.
So that's really, it's in developing that kind of stuff. That's where that's where I come alive. Do you know, I'm just so interested in this. And again, it's all about kind of when the exit comes, you know, and I would like to live a long time, healthy,
Hmm.
I think that there's just such value in really appreciating the fact that, for me, I think we're here to really just learn as much as we can about what this human experience is.
Yeah. No, 100%. You know, like as you're talking, it just reminded me of like there's some people where, oh, like, well, no, growing up, you can just say, hey, to your best friend, hey, I'm coming over, and you come and you sit on that end of the couch. I'm just sitting on that end of the couch. We're completely doing something different, but just sharing that space, like we're just chilling. We don't have to talk. We don't have to do anything. But we're in the
There
same.
is stuff happening in that shared space, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
and things that a lot of people, we know that we don't talk about, that we have are, and some of it is that we're just finding out what's happening. These ideas of
Yeah.
like the quantum fields and the energetics that are happening between sets of phenomenon, and what that
Mm.
relationship is. So why do you want to sit down next to somebody that you trust and love and feel, mentally close to, you know,
Yeah.
because there's other things happening there that are allowing your neurophysiological experience to downregulate, or to
Mm.
replenish, if we will, right? And
Yeah.
that's not just coming from,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, to me,
Well.
I think this stuff is just so amazing because it happens, like all of us have those experiences in so many different ways where it's like, I connected with this person, someone,
Yeah. Well.
instantaneously, right? Or,
Yeah.
I feel so alone. And so, we know that, one of the therapies that helps so much with depression is exposure to nature, because you
Mm.
are immersed in an ecosystem that is heightened in its connection.
Wow.
So if you are taking your physical organism and placing it in another biological system that is highly collaborative, right? Highly connected, highly respectful. I'm not saying that,
Hmm.
the laws of the jungle and the strongest survive and all of that's happening, but there's such a strong sense of that multisensory kind of, experience, if you would, that putting your organism, your physical self in that you're picking up that up. That's why your blood pressure will lower and your sympathetic nervous system will relax, your hormonal panel will change, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I just,
Huh.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Actually, I never thought about, yeah, just even being in nature is so good because of that. Yeah, no, I've really never. I might look more into nature therapy, like when it comes to just what
Yeah.
it does for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do. Yeah, when I think back on moments where I have felt the most relaxed, it's because I am surrounded by nature and things of that, things like that. So,
We're
but
living. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, so I just kind of want to tie this into the U Lab,
Mm,
right? These
mhm.
conversations,
Yeah.
so that if now somebody is really interested in all of this
Right.
and they really want to, get into the U Lab, like I really want to learn more, and so what exactly, if someone does come to you and say, "Hey, Jen, U Lab, I want to be in it. I want to take me through this human connection stuff. Take me
Yeah. Yeah.
what's the U Lab? What does that look like?
Right.
Let's maybe start there. Like
Yeah.
if
Good
someone
question. Right.
is
What the heck are you
inspired,
doing
yeah,
over there?
yeah,
And how can we all play with the ULab? So at this time, there's a couple of different things that we do, and one is one-on-one with me. So that would be more
hmm
of a individual session. Those happen in person. They happen blended version. They happen virtually. We also have a package that's kind of like the deep work, right? The real deal.
yeah,
And basically, what that is my experience of working with people for the last 20 and 30 years, no matter where it's been, no matter
hmm
where it's been, is for the exact same reasons that we've just talked about. There's a value to working in person, and there's a value to being around somebody for an extended period of time
hmm
because we all have the bandwidth to show up as our best selves for a little while.
yeah,
And in order to kind of get into some of the layers of all this stuff, we have to develop enough trust and enough time in to be able to, sort of pull back those veils, right? Pull back those curtains, peel that onion, that's that
yeah,
analogy. And so the personal immersion offering is really scheduled one-on-one, and it's a 3 to 5 day experience that happens either at somebody's location, and there are times when that would be a protocol that we would want to use. It could be that we want to come in and also look at the environment you're living in. you know
hmm
how's the house doing? Is the house, are we disorganized in the house? Is your, are you getting any break from stuff? And it could be that we need to get in, a little geographical cure might be in order. And so
mm
there's 7 destinations globally that we can move to and have an immersive experience there: Indonesia, Cambodia, Sardinia, Tenerife,
mm
Argentina. And so we have practitioners as a part of our practitioners collective that are there. These are therapists, everything from yoga to breath work to cognitive based therapists, nutritionists, who are there to kind of help. So an example would be we have a client who is at a point in life that, they've done a lot of coaching,
mm
and it's just still something feels like, man, I'm not there. I'm not something,
yeah,
I don't want to put words in
mm
people's mouths. We all know that feeling of like, what the, you
what
know,
am I doing?
is this it?
Yeah, what's it all for?
Is this
Yeah,
it? You know?
mm
And I'm not here to say that we're solving or answering the question to, is this it?
yeah,
That is not it. What I think what it is like, if we, when people work with us and they come in and let's say, I'll give an example of a recent client. The manifestation of a lot of the stress had really developed very strongly with an unhealthy relationship with food. So that's
mm
where a lot was going. So, I'm pretty healthy, and I know, I can tell you about all the 5 diets like most women around the world. These, here's how we're supposed to eat, and here's how we're supposed to cook, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to purport that one is better than another, but if we have someone who's presenting where a majority of what is happening in terms of their stress mechanism and how it's being, and sort of the discomfort and disease that's coming from that, we're bringing in somebody to specifically help and look at that. So you're working with me and we're looking at these different modalities, and there's just some magic that happens. There's a secret sauce. So, there's longevity clinics where you can go and get the full, biofeedback, neurophysiological workup to extend your telomeres and do that. And I'm looking at it. And what we do is much more from a gestalt or a felt sense, right? It's not about living longer, right? It's really about, again, that are you actually here? Are you able to have as rich of a human experience as some people, like I said, it may be an interesting life versus a happy life, you know?
Yeah.
And so just really working with people where they're at in these different locations. So two ways. So we've got, one-on-one, and then we have these more deeper immersions where we bring in the practitioners collective of these incredible experts, medical qigong and, hyper talented, different modalities of yoga practitioners, breath work. So a lot of that kind of thing that some people may be more familiar with in terms of techniques to rebalance and reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of do a 360 look at that. And
Okay.
so those are the two main ways that you would connect with us now. Of course, we have, I'm sorry, I had to do it. I call it a muse letter, like a muse letter. What our
Mm-hmm.
meetings are, not a newsletter. So Insights is coming out. That's on a weekly basis now. And that's really where we're kind of asking three basic questions, right?
Mm.
What is this? What is adaptability, and what is our capacity for adaptability? What is awareness, and what is our capacity to develop awareness? And what is identity? And what is our capacity to expand our identity instead of feel a sense of identity threat?
Mm.
And all of this comes very deeply from the work that I worked on with the approach I'd mentioned earlier, the engaged identity approach. Um,
Yeah.
and as anyone, over 10 or 15 years, that has, thank goodness, gotten a little richer and a little bit more um, um, involved in terms of what it's suggesting as well. So yeah, basically, there's no off the rack stuff here. I think that there's so much great coaching work that's going on, and I think that's fantastic. And you'll see on the website it says coaching. And we're struggling right now. I and a lot of the people that I'm working with are struggling because that's not really what I do. I am not
Mm-hmm.
here to guide you through a particular thing. This is not
Mm-hmm.
solutions based therapy where I'm going
Mm.
to support you in finding your answer to whatever is ailing you at the moment. This is something on a level more akin to saying, do you have an interest in having a richer experience that also allows you full command of your emotions and acknowledgement of the good and the bad of that you'll have in life, and be able to navigate that with more equanimity, more ease, more balance. Doesn't mean without pain, doesn't mean without discomfort, but to start opening up the way so that as these things are happening, again, our awareness and adaptability are allowing our minds, or our identities, our meaning making, to not
Mm-hmm.
to not be constantly in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. Do you like how I do that?
Mm.
Yeah, I like to talk with my hands. So now I'm like, I just caught myself in the video. I was like, oh man, but yeah. So
That's a good visual. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I love it.
really like that, it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of. I mean, and so yeah. So I think that that's kind of what we're doing, and that might sound esoteric and a little woo woo to some people, but I think a lot of people, even quietly at some point, will be like, yeah, man, I want to know how to navigate this thing a little better.
Hmm.
I don't mean this week's problem or, this major frickin' meltdown that's happening, which again, we all want to do, but it's on a bigger, longer, deeper,
Yeah.
resonating at just a different level.
Hmm. It's more bigger picture. Yeah. You know what? And I think it's refreshing because most people will focus on, okay, let me help you get through this week. Okay, if you face this kind of problem, this is, but what you're talking about is more like, okay,
And
this is how
listen, man,
you,
100%, we need all that. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I know some people
yeah,
who are helping, especially right now with the state of the situation, not just in the United States, but around the world in different who are doing incredible work with people, and I don't want to just talk about trauma sensitive and trauma informed work, although, in those realms, frequently, because most people are experiencing some level of that. Again, I would
yeah,
argue that that's because they have not, some of it, how some people are more resilient than others? We say we don't understand why someone can go through so much and then rise to be who they become. And yet you have this
yeah,
person over here who doesn't seem to have had as much troubles and turmoils, and they're just kind of hanging. Why? Why? How? What is that resilience balance? And
mm,
again, I would argue that there's a question to ask around developing what we're trying to do at the U Lab. You could use the word resilience, but it would be
mm,
limiting because we're not trying to overcome anything as much as we're trying to embrace everything, and we're learning how to do that.
mm,
You
yeah.
know.
No, that's beautiful. No, that I love that. I love that, and I think that's a beautiful way to kind of wrap it up in general because I think, yeah, there's a lot for me to think about. I'm certainly gonna be reading all those insights every week just to kind of because we all need, as you said, we all need that help. We all need those things to kind of those questions to say, oh, how am I actually, and then by answering some of those questions, it can actually kind of bring you back to yourself. Like, oh, I was kind of getting lost a little and I just needed to come back and,
Yeah.
you know, move through it. So
Yeah.
I
Or
think,
go
yeah, I think
ahead.
that's a,
So, let's not. Oh, yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And again, it would be remiss of me to say that this nobody's invented the wheel. I did not just all of this information is out there with some extraordinary people doing some amazing research and work. It's the way that we're harnessing the work of so many and our own
mm-hmm,
personal experiences and sort of the gifts that the practitioners collective and myself, what we our little special sauce that all humans have. So,
yeah.
I'm super excited for anybody who wants to reach out and even just have a conversation about any of this further. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, for people listening, listen, Jen is an amazing conversationalist. You will get a lot out of it. Even if it's just 15 to 20 minutes, you will feel like, man, I need to talk to this lady for another 5 hours. And that's how, so I would encourage anybody to
Oh,
reach out.
thanks. I appreciate that.
100%. I would encourage people to
Fine.
reach out and talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've already learned a lot just from our conversation because we've had a few and I've already felt like, wow, there are certain things that you bring up that I'm like, huh, I hadn't actually considered it from that point of view. And again, there's so much to learn about this life. And so I'm already feeling like, you know,
And that's it right there. There's so much to learn. And so, if there was something that I was saying that we're doing at the U Lab, it's helping people learn how to learn about being human. None of us
mm,
have the answers to this stuff. You know, we are all
yeah,
ripping through the tulips with the best of our abilities. And what we're trying
exactly.
to do is just, sort of look at what those literal biological, physiological, neurological, spiritual, what are the capacities? What do we have as our toolkit? And to start seeing what we can do to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Well, well, I mean, I have appreciated you taking the time to go through all this. It's certainly like again opened my mind, and I would hope that people listening to this
Oh,
episode, their minds also get opened and they feel inspired to like, get connected to the U Lab, and also even just learn more about these different things that you've talked about.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it will make each of our lives better in general. So
Yeah.
again, I really do appreciate you taking the time to
Oh,
kind of
I feel this.
walk through all this.
You're so gifted at this. You make it. I've watched the other recordings and the other podcasts, and it's like you you just know it's the thing that you do. You just, through your genuineness and your authenticity, it's like you just make people feel like, yeah, okay, let's get in the sandbox and play. You know.
I do, yeah. I love playing in the sand. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I do love it. But anyway, thank you again, Jen, and listener. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And 100%, you can search the ULab on Instagram. You can search the ULab on LinkedIn. There's the ULab. What's the website that if you can just, is it the
We're
ULab.com?
www. We're theulab.co. So
The ULab.co, yes.
theulab.co. That's us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So please just search it up, see more of the stuff that she does, all that good stuff. And yeah, reach out. You can find her on LinkedIn, you can find her on Instagram, all these other things. So feel free. And yeah, so with that, we'll catch you next week for another good episode. And with that,
Can't
thank you
wait
so
till the
much,
next one.
everybody. Thanks. And thank you, Jen. And yeah, bye everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.